Okay, so earlier this week, Apple announced iOS 16 and iPadOS 16, and we've already done a video covering 28 secret iOS 16 changes that Apple did not mention in the event, but now I want to give you my thoughts on both iOS 16 and iPadOS 16 as a whole, and why I think that Apple killed it in so many ways, but also failed miserably in some other ways. The biggest change is the new lock screen, which, interesting enough, only the iPhone gets, and I do have some mixed feelings about it. On one hand, I really love how photos with depth get automatically recognized and the clock gets placed behind them. I also love how you can change the color of the clock to either something that matches the background or pretty much any color that you want, like we even have a full-on color picker here. I also love how I can now add widgets to the lock screen, which do resemble the Apple Watch complications, although I wish you could add more than just this narrow row. And the way these widgets look immediately made me think of the upcoming always-on display on the iPhone 14 Pro. All of these were actually designed to be as OLED-friendly as possible, with no color fill and super thin lines. But this is where my love for the lock screen ends, because everything else, I think, is very poorly made. Like, for example, I can change the clock font if I want, but all of these options, I don't know, they just look really, really bad. Like, some of these look like they were taken from a free Android launcher, and in fact, even the thinnest one is significantly thicker than the one on iOS 15. This honestly looks like Comic Sans. But I think that the worst part about it is that it completely messes up the way wallpapers work in iOS. Or for example, I can have multiple lock screens, which is pretty cool, but the moment I apply one of them, it will automatically change my home screen too. Now, for most people, this is fine, but for those who use different wallpapers for the lock screen and the home screen, this is a nightmare. For example, if I go to settings, then wallpaper, then let's say that I want to change my home screen wallpaper, so I tap on it. I have a couple of options. So I can toggle the blur of the main wallpaper, then I have two gradients that I can pick from, and then I get the Photos library, essentially. The problem here is that if I just want to use Apple's default wallpapers, I need to tap on Add New Wallpaper. Then I can, I don't know, add, let's say this one. But then this is also gonna change my lock screen again. So you're constantly fighting this battle between your lock screen wallpaper and your home screen wallpaper. Also, Apple has now removed the majority of the iOS 15 wallpapers, some of which were actually really cool. And instead, we have stuff like this. Just awesome, Apple. But aside from my mixed feelings on the lock screen, I do like the majority of the other changes. For example, I'm a big fan of the enhanced focus mode. So I'm not entirely sure how many of you have been using this, but just like I showed you in our iOS 15 25 secret tips video, you can actually have different home screens for work and for personal use that automatically change based on your location. But now you can also have your lock screen change based on your location and focus mode, and you can also add different filters for things such as a calendar, different email accounts, and even limit the messages and the conversations that you see from different people. And even the Safari tabs. You can have groups of tabs that you only see in different focus modes. I can also add a filter that triggers low power mode so that it's on when I'm at work, for example, so that I still have battery left when I get home. Or I can also add a filter for dark mode to enable that. And the best part is that I can create a custom focus mode too. For example, I've created one for working out, where once enabled, which by the way, gets enabled automatically when I start a workout on my Apple Watch. And now I have some custom widgets and only the things that I need for working out. Everything else is just silenced. But not even the new lock screen and the new focus mode options come close to how great of an upgrade having Stage Manager is on the iPad. For years and years now, everyone's been asking Apple to make the iPad Pro, you know, a pro device by giving us true app window management support. And we finally have it. Although the way Apple has implemented this is a bit weird. Stage Manager is actually a separate mode that you toggle through the control center. And once enabled, you get what looks to be almost macOS-like multitasking and multi-window support. So you can resize them and add more apps to the screen, up to 4 windows at the same time. And what's really cool is that you can have multiple workspaces and then easily switch between them. So you can have a lot of apps open, essentially. I do find it weird how this is not the default mode. Like, why do we still have the old multitasking style? Why is this still here? Also, some apps like the Fitness app and GarageBand do not actually work with Stage Manager. they just go full screen. Essentially, apps that only have an iPad version of them will not work with Stage Manager, which is a real bummer considering that macOS obviously doesn't have this limitation. However, the biggest downside by far is that you can only use Stage Manager on M1 iPads. Apple's argument is that non-M1 iPads simply do not have enough RAM. Now, I kind of get why the 4GB of RAM iPad Air 4 doesn't support Stage Manager, but the previous gen iPad Pros with 6GB of RAM should be able to, especially since they can already support 3 side-by-side apps at the same time, or 2 and plus 1 with a slide over. And Apple could just give us that, but I don't know, maybe they could limit the number of apps to 2 or 3 instead of 4. At least give us that, the new UI. What's even weirder is that Apple also added virtual memory swap in iPadOS 16, so that the system can use the iPad's SSD storage as RAM when it needs it. In fact, iPadOS 16 can use up to 16GB of storage as RAM. This seems to work on the M1 iPad Pros, and the 4th gen iPad Air? Yeah, I think that's a typo, and they meant the 5th gen iPad Air, which does come with the M1 chip. Running this many apps at the same time, especially with the multiple workspaces, likely does require more than 8GB of RAM, and it looks like only the M1 chip supports memory swap, possibly thanks to the much faster storage on these M1 models. However, I still think that if Apple really wanted to give the other iPads Stage Manager too, they would have easily found a solution for it. Another gigantic new feature that I absolutely love is proper external monitor support. Finally, that removes those pesky black bars. However, this also only works on the M1 iPads, and only when you have an external mouse connected, as by default it would still just mirror your screen with those black bars. But once you do connect your mouse, the UI on the external monitor would kinda look like macOS. You have full access to Stage Manager, which you can also use on the iPad at the same time, and for most people, I honestly think that this could replace a full-on computer at home. Something else that I find really cool is the new drag and drop. This works on both the iPhone as well as the iPad. Essentially, if you're in Safari or Photos and you have an image with a bit of depth, you can actually hold on the subject and then it would actually crop it out. And from there you can, I don't know, just go to Notes or Messages and send it to someone. On the iPad, this is especially useful if you have Affinity Photo or Procreate, as you can easily drag and drop objects into your projects, which I think is huge. And the same applies to Pages, Keynote, and so on. And of course, there are some even more changes that I found to be super awesome to have. For example, the iPad finally got a weather app, which looks great. It only took Apple 12 years, and yeah, still no calculator app yet. The iPhone got the ability to translate text straight from the camera. Before you had to select the text and then translate that, but now you can immediately translate a street sign. You can now unsend messages in iMessage, and you can also edit them, which is really cool, although this is something that we've had in apps like Telegram for a few years now. You can also start a FaceTime call on your Mac and then continue that from your iPhone, which is something that I think I'm going to be using quite a bit. And I also love that Freeform app, which will be coming to the iPad later in the year. Basically, this gigantic virtual whiteboard where you can add text, sticky notes, photos, PDFs, basically anything, and collaborate in real time with your friends, family, and coworkers. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that next-gen version of CarPlay one day in my own car. I don't actually own a car at the moment, but when I do, this is something that I would absolutely love for my car to have. The only feature that I'm a bit unsure about is passkeys, the ability to replace all passwords with a secure cryptographic key that sits on your device. And if that matches the key on the website server, then you can log in. And Apple says that this is something that Google and Microsoft will be implementing too, as this is the future of passwords moving forward. I guess we'll have to wait and see about that. At the end of the day, both iOS 16 and iPadOS 16 are one of the biggest updates that we ever got, and I think that Apple's definitely on the right track. But let me know in the comments, what do you guys think? And check out our previous 28 secret iOS 16 changes that Apple has not mentioned at the event. I'm Daniel, this has been ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.